Episode 57, DC, February 10th, 2025. In Germany, Merkel criticizes Merz flirtation with Neo Nazi AfD party. In episode 57, DC 1 Introduction, Rozep View 2 to 14, United States 15, Ecuador 16, Spain 17, and 18, Germany, Merkel and Merz 19, Italy, citizen scientists 20, Japan, citizen scientists. Longer table of contents follows in episode 57, DC 1 Introduction, Rozep View 2 Substack letters from an American, Heather Cox Richardson, February 9th, 2025. Yesterday, the National Institutes of Health under the Trump administration announced a new policy that will dramatically change the way the United States funds medical research. 317 things Trump and his team did this week. BBC News, February 8th, 2025. The third week of the Trump second term has been marked by more major action from the U.S. president and his team. Here is a reminder of 17 moves this week. 4 United States EPA demotes career employees overseeing science enforcement, and more. A spokeswoman for the agency said the change was common practice. Others said it injects partisanship into jobs that have always been neutral. A person in a white lab coat and safety goggles stands in a laboratory surrounded by beakers, tubes, and machinery. Research on PFAS, a family of toxic compounds known as forever chemicals, at an Environmental Protection Agency lab in Cincinnati. 5 United States for stunned federal workers, sleeplessness, anger, and tears. One thing lost in the Trump war on the federal bureaucracy is the collective voice of the employees, but some have begun to speak out. I have been going through the stages of grief, said Jacqueline Devine, who was recently fired from the U.S. Agency for International Development. 6 District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. letters in uproar as Trump and Musk wreak havoc. 7 District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Trump White House criticizes judge for blocking Musk team access to Treasury data. The Musk cost-cutting team from accessing Treasury payment and data systems, given widespread security concerns. The order of the judge on Saturday came in response to a lawsuit filed by 19 Democratic state attorneys general who said the president had given Musk aides who work for the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, virtually unfettered access to sensitive information. The State Department has given Congress formal notification that it plans to. Financial watchdog employees for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau were instructed on Saturday evening to cease all supervision and examination activity and all stakeholder engagement, effectively stopping the CFPB operations. 8 District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. working class voters are flocking to the party that betrays them. Here is why. 9 United States and Louisiana, the latest from New Orleans. Here is a Super Bowl riddle. Why are egg prices surging, not chicken wings? National Public Radio, NPR, February 7, 2025. Buffalo wings are the quarterback of many Super Bowl buffets. Despite strong demand, wing prices have remained fairly steady this year, even as egg prices have more than doubled. 10 Louisiana, New Orleans, revisiting the tense history of Trump and Taylor Swift as they both attend the Super Bowl. 11 Maryland, College Park, how could the weather service change under Trump? President Trump tangled with its forecasters during his first term as he slashes government spending. Many wonder what that means for weather data. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Center for Weather and Climate Prediction headquarters in College Park, Maryland. 12 New York City, bird flu suspected in deaths of ducks and wild birds at NYC zoos. 3 ducks died of the disease at the Queens Zoo, while 3 more ducks and 9 wild birds that died at the Bronx Zoo were being tested for the virus, according to the operator of the parks. 13 Ohio, the celebrity of Ramaswamy and Trump ties give him a jump in the race for Ohio governor. 14 Ohio, Springfield, Ohio sues Neo Nazi group, saying it intimidated Haitians. In the lawsuit, the city states that people associated with the group made death threats last year against those who expressed support for Haitian residents. 15 Ecuador, Quito, what to know about the presidential election in Ecuador as voters head to the polls on Sunday. Violence, unemployment, and the energy crisis in Ecuador will be top of mind. 16 Spain, Madrid, far-right leaders rally in Spain to make Europe great again. At a gathering in Madrid, members of European far-right parties set aside any trepidation they might have about Trump threats and instead focused on a common enemy, the European Union. 17 Germany, Berlin, Angela Merkel is retired, but she is still on the ballot. If anything unites the parties in the German election campaign, it is running away from the former chancellor whose legacy voters have soured on. 18 Germany, the front-runner Merz in Germany, a risk-taker who flirted with far-right. 19 Italian court ruling gives hope for cleanup in the land of fires. In Italy, the European Court of Human Rights took Italy to task for not protecting citizens in an area where illegal dumping and burning of toxic waste has long been linked to cancers. Residents say it is about time. 20 Japan, Odaka and Tsushima, Fukushima nuclear disaster zone. Citizen scientists reclaim the nuclear disaster zone of Japan. Armed with measuring devices, groups of citizens are embracing science to monitor radioactive fallout and regain control of lives upended by the 2011 meltdowns in Fukushima. Main content 1A Rozep analysis of the 20 news article excerpts that follow. Excerpts 1 to 14. In the United States, Trump attempted shutdown of work of federal government agencies continues. The Democratic wing of the legislative branch protests. Some judges block some moves to shut down government functions. The human cost of loss of employment is described in some article excerpts. 15 In Ecuador, a country facing an energy crisis, has a presidential race heading for a runoff as of February 10th, 2025. 16 In Spain, far-right groups from across Europe assembled in solidarity with Trump action in the United States. 17 and 18 In Germany, after CDU head Friedrich Merz was criticized by former CDU head Angela Merz after he flirted with the Neo Nazi AfD party in order to pass an anti-immigration bill. That anti-immigration bill failed, and that failure may have hurt Merz changes for a large electoral victory on February 23, 2025 in the German snap election. 19 Italian citizen scientists collect data on visible manifestations of harm to humans from toxic waste pollution. Court ruling gives hope for cleanup in land of fires. In Italy, the European Court of Human Rights took Italy to task for not protecting citizens in an area where illegal dumping and burning of toxic waste has long been linked to cancers. 20 Japan, citizen scientists collect radiation readings. Odaka and Tsushima, Fukushima nuclear disaster zone. Citizen scientists reclaim the nuclear disaster zone in Japan. Armed with measuring devices, groups of citizens are embracing science to monitor radioactive fallout and regain control of lives upended by the 2011 meltdowns in Fukushima. 1B Introduction, Rozep View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban With stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue presumably because it is called renewable wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5. Particulate matter of 25 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention based on the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Burning wood instead of coal increases the adverse health effects of PM 2.5 air pollution and hastens climate change. Stopping burning wood for residential home heating is an easy, incremental way to be kind to your neighbor and to the planet. Choosing to burn wood when burning wood when it is more expensive than heating your home with a heat pump that is less expensive when you use the United States heat pump rebates available in 2025 in many states is like choosing a gas-powered car above an electric car when both are of equal price. Many of the Trump tariffs will result in less manufacture of clean electric vehicles in the United States and less price reduction to customers on existing electric vehicles. 2 Substack letters from an American excerpts. Edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Heather Cox Richardson, February 9, 2025. Yesterday, the National Institutes of Health under the Trump administration announced a new policy that will dramatically change the way the United States funds medical research. Now, when a researcher working at a university receives a federal grant for research, that money includes funds to maintain equipment and facilities and to pay support staff that keep labs functioning. That indirect funding is built into university budgets for funding expensive research labs, and last year reached about 26% of the grant money distributed. Going forward, the administration says it will cap the permitted amount of indirect funding at 15%. NIH is the primary agency in America for research in medicine, health, and behavior. NIH grants are fiercely competitive. Only about 20% of applications succeed when a researcher applies. For one, their proposal is evaluated first by a panel of their scholarly peers, and then if it passes that level, an advisory council which might ask for more information before awarding a grant. Once awarded and accepted, an NIH grant carries strict requirements for reporting and auditing as well as record retention. In 2023, NIH distributed about $35 billion through about 50,000 grants to over 300,000 researchers at universities, medical schools, and other research institutions. Every dollar of NIH funding generated about $246 in economic activity. For every $100 million of funding, research supported by NIH generates 76 patents, which produce 20% more economic value than other U.S. patents and create opportunities for about $600 million in future research and development. As Christina Jewett and Cheryl Gay Stahlberg of the New York Times explained, the authors of Project 2025 called for the cuts outlined in the new policy, claiming those cuts would reduce federal taxpayer subsidization of leftist agendas. Dr. David A. Baltras of the University of Arizona told Jewett and Stahlberg that the new policy is going to destroy research universities in the short term, and I do not know after that they rely on the money they budget for the money. The universities were making decisions expecting the money to be their cancer research is the top area in which NIH grants are awarded. Figuring out what the new NIH policy would mean for states by looking at institutions that received more than $10 million in grants in 2024 and figuring out what percentage of their indirect cost would not be eligible for grant money under the new formula. 6 schools in New York, $124 billion, including $953 million for indirect costs. The new indirect rate would allow only $220 million for overhead, a loss of $723 million. States across the country will experience significant losses. 8 Florida schools received about $673 million, $231 million for indirect costs. The new indirect rate would limit that funding to $66 million, a loss of $165 million. 6 schools in Ohio received a total of about $700 million. They would lose $194 million. 4 schools in Missouri received a total of about $830 million. They would lose $212 million. The same Republican-dominated states that complained bitterly about the tax policies of the government are also the same states that take most federal tax money. Republican leaders in the states claim to be enthusiastic about the cuts made by the Department of Government Efficiency, but are mobilizing to make sure those cuts will not hurt their own state programs that depend on federal money. I am the average neighbor in your community, but there is another side to that person. The author wrote, I orchestrated a clandestine operation to secure the release of an Allied soldier held captive by the Taliban. I prevented an ISIS terrorist from boarding a commercial aircraft. I spent 3 months listening to phone intercepts in real time to gather evidence needed to dismantle a violent drug gang. I recruited a source to provide critical intelligence on Russian military activities in Africa. I rescued a citizen being tortured to near death by members of an outlaw motorcycle gang. I interceded and stopped a juvenile planning to conduct a school shooting. I spent multiple years monitoring the activities of deep cover foreign intelligence officers leading to their arrest and deportation. I endured extensive hardship to infiltrate a global child trafficking organization. I have been shot in the line of duty when I am gone. They wrote, who will do the quiet work that is behind the facade of your average neighbor? 317 Things Trump and his team did this week. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. BBC News, February 8, 2025. The third week of the Trump second term has been marked by more major action from the U.S. president and his team. Here is a reminder of 17 moves this week. 3. Trump imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese imports on Tuesday, but held off on his threat of implementing 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico for 30 days. The tariffs, which some experts suggest could exacerbate inflation, were part of the Trump campaign platform ahead of the election in November. Some Canadians cancel U.S. subscriptions and trips after Trump threats. China threatens to retaliate with tariffs on the U.S. For the Trump administration had offered incentives to federal workers to voluntarily resign by a Thursday midnight deadline. However, a U.S. judge temporarily halted the plan hours before the deadline, pausing it until a hearing on Monday to determine the merits of a lawsuit filed by federal employee unions. Some of the more than 2 million federal government civilian workers have voiced confusion about the terms of the deal, which the administration says would allow them to receive pay and benefits through September in exchange for resigning. Critics have questioned the legality of the offer, and some federal employee unions have advised members to exercise caution around accepting the deal. 7. Trump also took action to end U.S. involvement in several UN institutions. The U.S. would no longer participate in the UN Human Rights Council UNHRC, and the U.S. would conduct a review of its membership in the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization UNESCO within 90 days. 9. On Monday, Trump said he wanted Ukraine to guarantee the supply of more rare earth metals in exchange for $300 billion, £240 billion to support its fight against Russia. We want what we put up to go in terms of a guarantee. We are looking to do a deal with Ukraine where we are going to secure what we are giving them with their rare earth minerals and other things. Trump said Ukraine has large deposits of uranium, lithium, and titanium, which can be used for defense and electronics manufacturing. In response, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country was open to investment by American companies. Zelensky says war will end sooner with Trump as president. 14. Removed climate change mentions from government websites. Starting last week, the Trump administration reportedly ordered some U.S. government agency websites to remove references to climate change. It has affected the websites of the Departments of Transportation, Defense, State, and Agriculture, which manages the Forest Service. The Guardian reported some climate content remained on the sites of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, NASA, and Energy Department this week. Some employees at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, were also ordered to temporarily stop communicating with foreign nationals. The change came after reports that staff from the Musk Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which is not an official government department, entered the offices of NOAA and took over the agency internal websites. 15. Increased access for the Musk DOGE. President Trump said on Friday that he had directed the Musk DOGE, a cost-cutting initiative, to shrink the federal government to check out spending at the Defense Department, among other agencies, Pentagon, education, just about everything. The Trump administration also gave members of DOGE access to a U.S. Treasury Department payment system that controls the flow of trillions of dollars in funds every year. But on Saturday, a federal judge blocked DOGE from accessing the personal financial data of millions of Americans in Treasury Department records. A U.S. district judge issued a preliminary injunction to prohibit access, ordering Musk and his team to immediately destroy any copies of records. 17. Scraps task force that seized assets of Russian oligarchs. The Trump Attorney General Bondi this week disbanded a force designed to combat foreign interference in elections, as well as another initiative which targeted Russian oligarchs. In an order signed on the first day in office of Bondi, she disbanded the Foreign Influence Task Force of the FBI, which aimed to prevent foreign meddling in U.S. elections, to reassign its staff. Bondi also disbanded Task Force Kleptocapture, which was launched after Russian invasion of Ukraine. It had been tasked with seizing yachts and other assets from Russian oligarchs. 4. United States EPA demotes career employees overseeing science enforcement, and more. A spokeswoman for the agency said the change was common practice. Others said it injects partisanship into jobs that have always been neutral. A person in a white lab coat and safety goggles stands in a laboratory surrounded by beakers, tubes, and machinery. Research on PFAS, a family of toxic compounds known as forever chemicals, at an Environmental Protection Agency lab in Cincinnati. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. February 4, 2025. The Environmental Protection Agency is demoting career employees who oversee scientific research, the enforcement of pollution laws, hazardous waste cleanup, and the agency Human Resources Department, and will replace them with political appointees. According to two people familiar with the approach, the move would give Trump administration loyalists more influence over aspects of the agency that were traditionally led by nonpartisan experts who have served across Republican and Democratic administrations. It would also make it easier for the Trump administration to bypass Congress, while those formally overseeing sections of the EPA must be confirmed by the Senate. The new appointees would be able to assume the role of acting department heads, circumventing the need for congressional approval. During the Biden administration, Joseph Goffman served as the principal deputy assistant administrator of the EPA office overseeing air pollution. He held that job for 3 years, helping to write strict limits on greenhouse gas emissions from power plants and automobiles. He was finally confirmed by the Senate in January 2024. Critics said the difference was that while EPA air and water offices manage the bulk of federal regulation and are likely to reflect the Trump priorities, the moves from the Trump administration inject partisanship in segments of the agency that had been neutral. 5. United States for stunned federal workers, sleeplessness, anger, and tears. One thing lost in the Trump war on the federal bureaucracy is the collective voice of the employees, but some have begun to speak out. I have been going through the stages of grief, said Jacqueline Devine, who was recently fired from the U.S. Agency for International Development. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. February 9, 2025. One was fired by email at 12:47 a.m. Another wept with colleagues as security escorted Her from the office a third frantically tried to fill a prescription after she got a 24-hour notice that her healthcare was ending. One thing lost in the Trump war on the federal bureaucracy is the collective voice of the workers. Many of those fired, or in limbo, say they feel silenced by Musk, whose gleeful, vengeful posts describing USAID as a criminal organization that he fed into the wood chipper make them fear retribution. Others do not want to speak publicly because of pending lawsuits or orders from their agencies, but a few from USAID, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Justice Department spoke in interviews last week. Experts and the workers themselves acknowledge that reforms are needed in the federal workforce, which counts around 24 million people, excluding the uniformed military and the Postal Service. The numbers have not grown significantly in the past decade, though the total of federal contractors had ballooned to an estimated 5 million by 2020, but experts said that the Musk tactics, including offering blanket deferred resignations to 2 million workers, amounted to an immolation of government without thought or strategy. What if the people who resign are the people who process the Social Security payments? The pain is particularly acute in Washington, where an economy of 40% of the region, including federal workers, contractors, nonprofits, and businesses, is tied to the federal government, and yet more than 80% of federal workers live in other parts of the country. I heard from a forest worker in Idaho who feared for his job. Americans were largely unaware of the work of civil servants across the nation. The human story is getting ignored. The purged prosecutor Strubing, a federal prosecutor in the office of the U.S. Attorney in Washington, was fired by email on January 31st. In a purge of more than a dozen people, the email to Strubing said explicitly that we were being fired for working on the January 6th cases. Strubing, 33, is one of the few fired prosecutors who have gone public and in recent days has made the rounds on CNN and MSNBC. Formerly in private practice in the Washington office of a powerhouse law firm, Strubing got his dream job in September 2023 at the Justice Department. He was hired to help handle the January 6th cases, the largest prosecution in the history of the department. I loved every second at the Justice Department. He was in court multiple times a week and handled 4 trials. He was especially proud, he said, of getting a January 6th defendant convicted on all counts for an assault on a police officer. The alarmed union lawyer, I am just horrified, said Nicole Cantello, a former lawyer for the Environmental Protection Agency who represents its union in Chicago. MS Cantello was reacting to emails that landed on Thursday, putting 168 employees in the EPA Office of Environmental Justice on administrative leave, including a number in Chicago. Ms. Cantello said she is not sure of her own future. Project 2025, the blueprint for a new Trump administration that has turned out to align with many of the Trump early actions, suggested eliminating unions of government workers entirely. In the meantime, Ms. Devine, the fire contractor from the USAID Office of HIV/AIDS, said she was overwhelmed by all the chaos. When she was asked why she was speaking out, her answer was swift. I have nothing to lose, she said. 6th District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. letters in uproar as Trump and Musk wreak havoc. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 7th, 2025. Like so many, I awoke on Monday to this post on X from Musk. We spent the entire weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper. Could gone to some great parties, did that instead. Abominable grammar, but his point is clear. He is gleefully destroying the lives of millions of the poorest in the world and denigrating the service of thousands of highly educated, loyal, and dedicated workers. It is nauseating, if not maniacally unbalanced. What kind of person gloats as he destroys an organization that has helped save millions of people from AIDS, Ebola, and other infectious diseases? 7th District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Trump White House criticizes judge for blocking Musk team access to Treasury data. The Musk cost-cutting team from accessing Treasury payment and data systems, given widespread security concerns. The order of the judge on Saturday came in response to a lawsuit filed by 19 Democratic state attorneys general who said the president had given Musk aides who work for the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, virtually unfettered access to sensitive information. The State Department has given Congress formal notification that it plans to. Financial watchdog employees for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau were instructed on Saturday evening to cease all supervision and examination activity and all stakeholder engagement, effectively stopping the agency operations. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. February 9th, 2025. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, said this morning that his party would not rule out forcing a government shutdown or debt default on the Trump administration to stop President Trump legally questionable actions in dismantling federal agencies. We are in a crisis right now, and Democrats will use every tool possible to protect Americans, he said on CNN. If Congress does not pass a new spending bill by March 14th, the federal government will shut the administration. Fork in the road offer sent by email to roughly 2 million federal employees by the Government Office of Personnel Management, encouraging them to resign, was blocked for now by a Massachusetts judge on Thursday. 3 lawsuits challenged the Trump effort to overhaul the civil service, stripping away job protections from tens of thousands of employees and giving the White House unilateral firing authority if they fail to faithfully implement administration policies. Other lawsuits challenged the Trump attempts to unilaterally fire a member of the National Labor Relations Board, one of several agencies that are supposed to be independent of the executive branch. A lawsuit to stop the Musk team from accessing sensitive data at the Treasury Department yielded an agreement to do so for now. January 6th, investigators, 2 groups of FBI agents and Bureau employees, sued to block Trump from releasing the names of agents and staff members who participated in the investigations into the Capitol riot on January 6th, 2021. Trying to head off what they fear is a looming purge. On Friday, the government agreed not to release the names. While the case is being heard by Judge J.M. Cobb of the District of Columbia, a nominee of President Biden. 8th District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. working class voters are flocking to the party that betrays them. Here is why. D. Earl Stevens, January 17th, 2025. Ever since the lights went out following the most disappointing and terrifying election in my lifetime, I have been looking for answers in all the dark places. What could possibly lead so many people to vote for an overtly racist, criminal, and blubbering idiot who poured Lysol on a raging pandemic before spearheading an attempted coup, instead of the incredibly accomplished woman who has actually spent the bulk of her professional life standing up for the rule of law and protecting our country instead of attacking it? Maybe it is just misogyny and I can be done with my search for enlightenment. There are no doubt plenty of people in this damn country who still believe that in the year 2025 the only place in the White House for a woman is the kitchen, but I sense there is something more sinister at play here. Like many of you, I am sure I have had trouble following the news too closely since excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, raw story November 5th, 2024. Because I get so goddamn mad and depressed that after about 5 minutes or so I am on the verge of a heart attack, and are finding some innocent dog to kick. He does love the undereducated and dictators though. So there is that. While Democrats go high, paint a soaring picture of America and have detailed plans for improving our lives, Trump just treats the place like one of his golden toilets that he can dump on offers, concepts of plans and abuses. His golf clubs while escaping work on Monday. He will be back harumphing around our White House telling us how bad everything is while billing Americans for the trouble. I might be wrong that a decided increase in idiotic people is the reason for American descent toward fascism, but I am confident as hell that many working class Republican voters and the millions of Democrats who stayed home on November 5th are about to get the government they deserve. 9 Louisiana, New Orleans, the latest from New Orleans. Here is a Super Bowl riddle. Why are egg prices surging, not chicken wings? Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, National Public Radio, NPR, February 7th, 2025. Buffalo wings are the quarterback of many Super Bowl buffets. Despite strong demand, wing prices have remained fairly steady this year, even as egg prices have more than doubled. Buffalo wings are the quarterback of many Super Bowl buffets. Despite strong demand, wing prices have remained fairly steady this year, even as egg prices have more than doubled. Here is an economic riddle ahead of the Super Bowl. Egg prices have been going through the roof as a stubborn outbreak of avian flu haunts the U.S. egg-laying chickens. So why have the prices of chicken wings barely budged? In New Orleans, the Super Bowl 2025 is between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. Chicken wings have remained abundant and affordable, even as some supermarkets are rationing eggs, and Waffle House added a 50-cent per egg surcharge this week. The avian flu has taken a different toll on birds that produce eggs and those raised for their meat. Nationwide, egg farmers lost more than 38 million birds to the flu last year, nearly 14 million in December alone. That has put a crack in the U.S. egg supply, which shows no sign of easing. When a flock of egg-laying hens is wiped out, it takes 6 months to a year to recover. Chickens raised for meat, known as broilers, live on different farms than those that produce eggs, and while broilers are not immune from avian flu, they have not been hit nearly as hard as their egg-laying cousins. They are younger typically, and older birds are more susceptible to the virus, says Tom Super of the National Chicken Council, and broiler chickens are also not on the farm as long, only about 7 weeks. A sign warns that egg supply may be limited at a grocery store in Miami. On January 23, 2025, egg farmers lost more than 38 million birds to the avian flu last year. That short life cycle also means when a flock of broilers is lost to the flu, they can be replaced fairly quickly. Demand for chicken wings jumped 12% during the NFL playoffs compared to the previous month. Despite that surge, wing prices remained grounded slightly below their 5-year average. The price of celery, often served alongside chicken wings, is down more than 8% from a year ago. 10 Louisiana, New Orleans, revisiting Trump and the Taylor Swift tense history as they both attend the Super Bowl. President excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 8th, 2025. Super Bowl 59 sees the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles playing against one another for the ultimate trophy win, but those teams will not be the only adversaries present at New Orleans Caesars Superdome. President Trump and musician Taylor Swift will also be in attendance after staying away from publicly commenting on politics during the beginning of her career. Swift endorsed a Democratic candidate in the U.S. Senate election in Tennessee in 2018-2020. Swift calls out Trump for actions towards the USPS. In August 2020, Trump admitted that he opposed additional funding for the United States Postal Service USPS in order to make it more difficult to deliver mail-in ballots. On X, Swift called out the president over his actions. The Trump calculated dismantling of USPS proves one thing clearly: he is well aware that we do not want him as our president. She wrote, he has chosen to blatantly cheat and put millions of Americans' lives at risk in an effort to hold on to power. October 2020, Swift endorses Biden over Trump in her first presidential endorsement. September 10th, 2024, the Swift endorsement of Harris. Soon after the Trump debate with Harris ended, Swift took to social media and officially endorsed the former vice president. Like many of you, I watched the debate tonight, Swift wrote in an Instagram post on September 10th to her over 200 million followers. I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I am voting for at Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. She signed the post with her name followed by childless cat lady, a reference to Vice comments of President J.D. Vance about his Democratic opponents and women who choose not to give birth, calling them childless cat ladies. Trump reacts to Taylor Swift publicly endorsing Kamala Harris. A post Trump published about Taylor Swift on the social media platform Truth Social displayed on a smartphone on September 17th, 2024. September 15th, 2024, Trump says he hates Swift 5 days after Swift endorsed Harris for president. Trump posted, I hate Taylor Swift on his social media app Truth Social. 11, Maryland College Park. How could the weather service change under Trump? President Trump tangled with its forecasters during his first term as he slashes government spending. Many wonder what that means for weather data. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Center for Weather and Climate Prediction headquarters in College Park, Maryland. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 8th, 2025, as President Trump issues rapid-fire executive orders intended to drastically reduce the federal workforce and dismantle several agencies. Many federal employees are left wondering what the future holds at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the federal agency with wide-ranging responsibilities that include disentangling whales from fishing nets off Alaska, gathering satellite data on wildfires in California, and issuing tornado warnings in Kansas. One question of many that remain unanswered is what will happen to the National Weather Service? The Trump first term. Trump has shown a preference for the private sector when it comes to weather. During his first term, he nominated Barry Myers, the former chief executive of AccuWeather, one of the U.S. largest private weather forecasters, to lead. Noah Myers remained unconfirmed by the Senate for more than 2 years. He withdrew from the process in 2019, criticizing Democrats who had voiced concerns over his possible conflicts of interest. 12, New York City bird flu suspected in deaths of Ducks and wild birds at NYC Zoo's 3 ducks died of the disease at the Queens Zoo, while 3 more ducks and 9 wild birds that died at the Bronx Zoo were being tested for the virus, according to the operator of the park's. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 8, 2025. 3 ducks at the Queens Zoo died because of bird flu, and as many as 12 more birds at the Bronx Zoo that died after possible exposure were being tested for the virus, according to the Wildlife Conservation Society, the nonprofit that operates the parks. The deaths and possible exposures at the Queens Zoo and the Bronx Zoo, one of the largest and most well-known zoos in the United States, come as an outbreak of bird flu has spread across the country, sickening chickens and dairy cattle and driving up the price of eggs. On Friday, Gov. Kathy Hochul ordered all live bird markets in New York City and a few surrounding counties to close temporarily in an effort to stem the spread of the virus. The order from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Markets requires live bird markets that have not detected any bird flu cases to sell their inventories and disinfect their operations. The virus, called H5N1, has infected roughly 156 million commercial backyard and wild birds across the country since January 2022. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has said that the illness poses minimal risks to the health of the general public and that it does not yet have the ability to spread readily among people. The Wildlife Conservation Society, which also operates the Central Park Zoo, the Prospect Park Zoo, and the New York Aquarium on Coney Island, said that as a precaution the organization had recently moved vulnerable bird species to separate protected areas inside its parks. It has also limited the exposure of other animals in its care to wild birds, and especially to waterfowl, which are known to be carriers of the virus. We have assessed and reviewed our protocols regarding risk to our birds from avian influenza, the nonprofit said in a statement. Our veterinarians and curators continue to closely monitor the situation in the region and are collaborating with city, state, and federal agencies. The Bronx and Queens zoos remained open on Saturday, the organization said, noting the low risk of visitors coming into contact with zoo birds or contracting the virus. 13 Ohio, the celebrity of Ramaswamy and Trump ties give him a jump in the race for Ohio governor. The short and rocky tenure in Washington of Vivek Ramaswamy is not turning off Republican voters in his home state. Vivek Ramaswamy, who has never held public office in Ohio, is expected to announce his candidacy for governor there late this month. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 9, 2025. On Monday morning, Vivek Ramaswamy was soft launching his campaign for governor of Ohio. A man sat at a coffee shop counter in Delaware, a suburb of Columbus, weighing the prospect of Ramaswamy, a political celebrity but a governing novice running the state. I like his views, said the man, 44, an operations manager for a pallet company, but he also liked Trump and was not sure what to make of the Ramaswamy exit from the Trump Department of Government Efficiency Task Force 2 weeks earlier. I would still like to read a little bit more because he was backed by Trump for a little bit, and then all of a sudden that changed gears, he said. Ramaswamy, 39, is expected to formally announce his campaign for governor late this month, according to a spokesman, a move that follows a brief appointment to the second Trump administration that ended before Inauguration Day. He has never occupied a government office in Ohio or even run for one. He moved his investment firm out of the state to Texas last year. Still, as long as Ramaswamy is a Trump ally in good standing, he appears to have a leg up. 14 Ohio, Springfield, Ohio sues Neo Nazi group, saying it intimidated Haitians in the lawsuit. The city states that people associated with the group made death threats last year against those who expressed support for Haitian residents. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 8, 2025. The city of Springfield, Ohio, which was singled out by Trump and J.D. Vance during the presidential campaign with false and outrageous claims about Haitian immigrants, has sued a neo-Nazi group that helped draw national attention to the small city in the first place. The suit, filed in federal court on Thursday, was brought by the mayor Rob Rue along with several city commissioners and Springfield residents. It says that Blood Tribe, a 4-year-old neo-Nazi group, began a campaign of intimidation focused on Haitian immigrants in the city. It culminated last summer in a torrent of hateful conduct, including acts of harassment, bomb threats, and death threats against locals who spoke in support of the Haitian residents. The plaintiffs cite the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which makes it a crime to deny individuals their civil rights, and accuses Blood Tribe of ethnic intimidation and inciting violence with the legal support of the Anti-Defamation League. The plaintiffs are seeking punitive damages and compensation for the thousands of dollars spent on extra security as the campaign of the Blood Tribe unfolded. The suit does not mention Trump, who falsely claimed at a presidential debate in September that Haitian immigrants in Springfield were eating dogs and cats, nor Vance, who urged his fellow patriots to keep the cat memes flowing. But the suit says that the leader of Blood Tribe gleefully took credit for the growing notoriety of the false claims about Haitians in the city, bragging on social media that the Blood Tribe had pushed Springfield into the public consciousness. The suit did not name a lawyer for the Blood Tribe leader, who could not be reached for comment. In recent years, between 10,000 and 20,000 Haitians had come to Springfield, a city of about 60,000 in southwestern Ohio, attracted by the substantial labor needs of the warehouses and manufacturing businesses in the area. In early September, in the midst of campaign of the Blood Tribe, a woman in Springfield wrote a post on social media falsely claiming that the Haitians in Springfield had been butchering cats. The post went viral, and on September 9, Vance, at the time a U.S. senator, cited the claims on social media. Trump repeated them at the presidential debate the following day. Around that time, at least 33 bomb threats were made by phone or email against hospitals, schools, private residences, and an array of businesses in Springfield, causing multiple evacuations. The lawsuit says the suit attributes many of those threats to members and associates of Blood Tribe. The Blood Tribe is incredibly confrontational, he said, pointing out that one of the other prominent extremist events in recent months, a Neo Nazi march in Columbus, Ohio in November, was organized by a former member turned rival of Blood Tribe. 15 Ecuador, Quito. What to know about the presidential election in Ecuador as voters head to the polls on Sunday. Violence, unemployment, and the energy crisis in Ecuador will be top of mind. People dressed in purple shirts hold banners, balloons, and a cardboard cutout. Supporters holding banners and cardboard cutouts of President Daniel Noboa of Ecuador during a campaign event on Wednesday in Quito, the capital. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 9, 2025. Daniel Noboa, the center-right president of Ecuador, is facing re-election after 15 months in office. His predecessor Guillermo Lasso called for early Elections in 2023 amid impeachment proceedings over embezzlement accusations. Noboa 37, a Harvard Kennedy School graduate, who comes from one of the wealthiest families in Ecuador, rose unexpectedly in the polls to win election and serve out the remainder of the term of Lasso. At stake is the direction to be taken by the troubled nation of nearly 18 million. Noboa was first elected on the back of a desperate desire for change following an explosion of insecurity in Ecuador and a particularly bloody 2023 election cycle, including the assassination of another presidential candidate. Ecuador is facing an energy crisis. A drought last year in a country that largely depends on hydroelectric energy caused daily 14-hour power cuts for about 3 months. The crisis threatened water cell and internet service, shut down businesses, and endangered entire industries. Polls show Noboa in the lead ahead of the election on Sunday, with the possibility that he could win enough votes to avoid a runoff. Note, there is now a runoff for this election as of February 10, 2025. 16 Spain. Madrid. Far-right leaders rally in Spain to make Europe great again. At a gathering in Madrid, members of the far-right parties of Europe set aside any trepidation they might have about Trump threats and instead focused on a common enemy, the European Union. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, February 8, 2025. Since taking office, President Trump has threatened the security and economies European countries' angle to take control of Greenland and promised to definitely slap the nations with tariffs. Even parties that would seem to be his natural allies are nervous. Some have quietly tiptoed back from the American president, but Saturday was not the day for disputes. Leaders of far-right parties in Europe came to Madrid for what on the surface at least amounted to a bold-faced names booster rally for a new Trump era. There was Marine Le Pen of France of the far-right National Rally, the populist Geert Wilders of the Netherlands, and Matteo Salvini, the leader of the League Party of Italy. All made clear that they shared the Trump charges against overweening environmentalism. For them, the American president had blown through the last barriers that had confined their parties to the political margins. The taboos had been toppled. The Trump tornado has changed the world in just a couple of weeks. Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary told his allies from the stage of the summit, whose slogan was "Make Europe Great Again." Yesterday, "We were the heretics," he said. "Now we are the mainstream." Orban. Matteo Salvini. Andre Ventura with Geert Wilders. Salvini criticized the World Health Organization and the International Criminal Court. Trump moved to withdraw the United States from the WHO and issued an executive order imposing sanctions on the ICC. The Trump election represents the final opportunity, said Aphrodite Latinopoulou, a lawmaker with the Greek far-right party Voice of Reason. The party of Ms. Latinopoulou has no representation in the Greek parliament, but some leaders at the rally, including the League of Salvini and the Freedom Party of Wilders in the Netherlands, are already governing as part of coalitions. Other parties like the National Party of Ms. Le Pen and the Spanish Vox Party, which hosted the event, have risen in recent years but were still out of power, often kept out by an alliance of mainstream parties. Many of these parties are still considered pariahs in the European Parliament in Brussels, and right-wing leaders like Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy did not join the event organized by Patriots for Europe in elections last summer for the European Parliament. What many had anticipated would be a wave of support for far-right parties did not fully materialize, but many of these parties are popular among young voters and stand a chance to enter governments in coming elections. Along with Trump, they shared a distaste for the European Union, though many of their countries benefit from EU funds, and nearly all the parties have disavowed cries to leave the bloc since Brexit has proved to be a drag on the British economy. Nonetheless, it was clear that their idea of making Europe great again was to tear down the European Union. As it now stands at the gathering, the European Union was uniformly loathed as a group of unelected bureaucrats sealed in glass palaces with excessive regulation and sabotaging economies with climate policies. Since Russian invasion of Ukraine, most of European mainstream parties have come to accept spending more money on defense. The European Union is a pump that works in reverse. Ms. Le Pen said it sucks up the sovereignty from our states. When people at the event talked of making Europe great again, most talked about making Europe a beacon for Christianity, elevating individual nations. One member of the crowd said, "I have little in common with a Belgian or a Northern Italian. Reunification with South America is the dream." Some leaders praised free market economics, while others supported protectionism. Orban, who has long stood out even among the far right for his closeness to President Vladimir Putin of Russia, has criticized support for Ukraine because of Brussels. "We are giving our money to Ukraine in a hopeless war," he said on Saturday. 17 Germany. Berlin. Angela Merkel is retired, but she is still on the ballot if anything unites the parties in the German election campaign. It is running away from the former chancellor, whose legacy voters have soured on. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, February 9, 2025. A chorus of criticism greeted Friedrich Merz, the favorite to become the German chancellor, last month when he broke a taboo against working with a hard-right party to pass legislation, but it was a lone voice of dissent that rocked the German political scene. Angela Merkel, the once beloved former chancellor, who called the Merz decision simply wrong. Ms. Merkel and Merz have famously jockeyed to lead the German Christian Democrats for much of this century. Ms. Merkel won the early round, served 16 years as chancellor, and retired in 2021. Merz finally has a chance to win her old job in elections this month, but Ms. Merkel is complicating his efforts both with her open critiques and, more important, with a policy legacy that German voters have soured on. The German election is animated by concerns over a stagnant economy, a decade-long surge of immigration, high energy prices, and tenuous national security, with Russia waging war to the east and President Trump threatening to upend NATO from the west. The problems have led to a reconsideration of Ms. Merkel and how she steered Germany. It was Ms. Merkel who agreed to shut down the German nuclear power plants and increase German reliance on imported natural gas from Russia, helping to create an electricity price spike and a security crisis years later after Moscow decided to turn off the taps following its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And it was Ms. Merkel who economists say underinvested in revitalizing German critical infrastructure, contributing to what German business leaders often call a competitiveness crisis. She also pushed for deepened trade with China and the rest of the world in the waning weeks of the campaign. Ms. Merkel is taking criticism from all sides of the contest. Her memoir did not make the splash many analysts expected when it was released last fall. A poll released last week by the Bild news organization conducted by the research agency INSA found 43% of Germans now say the policies of Ms. Merkel were bad for the country, compared with 31% who say they were good in many ways. Ms. Merkel finds herself in a similar historical position to that of President Bill Clinton in America. She was once the most popular leader of her generation on the strength of overseeing an economic boom. Now, like Clinton, who has seen public opinion turn strongly against his moves to sign NAFTA and throw open trade with China, she finds her legacy under attack. She is responding with few regrets, and with the election looming, by criticizing Merz. Alice Weidel, the chancellor candidate for the AfD, repeatedly raised and disparaged Ms. Merkel last month in an interview with the billionaire Musk on his social media platform X. Christian Lindner, the chancellor candidate for the pro-business Free Democrats, said in an interview that some German parties have still not recognized what the overriding interest of the people in this country is, namely a break with the policies of Ms. Merkel. Even Merz has piled on. The criticism by Ms. Merkel of Merz came just before the final vote and further strained her relationship with the party they share. Ms. Merkel declined to take an honorary party position after her retirement, as is often customary, and rarely appears at party events. It also contributed to an image of stubbornness that has defined the time out of office of Ms. Merkel. She seemingly blamed her successors in the German mainstream political parties for aiding the rise of the AfD by tacking to the right on its signature issue of immigration. The Democratic parties have considerable influence over how strong AfD can become in practice. Ms. Merkel wrote, "I'm convinced that if they assume they can keep it down by appropriating its pet topics and even trying to outdo it in rhetoric without offering any real solutions to existing problems, they will fail." 18 Germany. The frontrunner in Germany, Friedrich Merz, a risk-taker who flirted with far-right excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. February 8, 2025 BBC Berlin. He is the man tipped to be the German next leader, an antidote to European crisis of confidence. The Merz explosive bid to tighten migration rules with the support of far-right votes in parliament reveals a man willing to gamble by breaking a major taboo. It also marks yet another clear break from the more centrist stance of his Christian Democratic Union CDU party under his former party rival Angela Merkel. Although Merz failed to change the law, he had launched a lightning bolt into an election campaign triggered by the collapse of the government of Chancellor Olaf Scholz late last year. Famously sidelined by Merkel before she became chancellor, he quit parliament entirely. Now there is a sense of inevitability that this 69-year-old comeback kid might be on the cusp of clinching the job he has coveted for so long. It is January 23, 2025, 1 month until the German snap federal election. The buzz around the ballroom is not exactly electric, but it is a far cry from 20 years ago when his political career looked over. Merz is also a licensed pilot who drew criticism in 2022 for flying to the North German island of Sylt in his private plane for the wedding of fellow politician Christian Lindner, the politician whose firing by Olaf Scholz led to the German February 23, 2025 snap election. Merz is the leader of the German conservative CDU opposition, who are consistently ahead in the polls. Merz was born in the West German town of Brilon in 1955 into a prominent conservative Catholic family. Younger Merz joined the CDU while still at school. After school, he went on to military service before studying law for a few years. Merz worked as a lawyer, but he always had his eye on politics and was elected to the European Parliament in 1989. Aged 33, Friedrich Merz eventually left politics in 2009, several years after rival Angela Merkel won the leadership of the CDU party. It would be more than a decade before he returned to parliament, where he has since sought to rip up the more centrist doctrine on CDU conservatism of Merkel. Merz tried but failed to take over the leadership of the CDU from Merkel in 2018. A marked moment of political severance came at the end of last month when Friedrich Merz pushed through a non-binding motion on tougher immigration rules by relying on votes from the far-right alternative für Deutschland AfD. He insisted there had been no direct collaboration with the AfD, but his move led to mass protests and has twice been condemned by none other than Merkel herself. Detractors say it was an unforgivable election gambit that will only benefit the AfD, but supporters insist Merz is in fact seeking to lure people cleverly from the far-right. 19 Italian citizen scientists collect data on visible manifestations of harm to humans from toxic waste pollution. Court ruling gives hope for cleanup in land of fires in Italy. The European Court of Human Rights took Italy to task for not protecting citizens in an area where illegal dumping and burning of toxic waste has long been linked to cancers. Residents say it is about time. A stretch of land along a canal is lined with construction waste, illegally dumped waste scattered on the side of a road in Marcianus, part of an area known as the Land of Fires north of Naples, Italy. Last month, reporting from Asera, Italy. Excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. February 9, 2025. Until a few days ago, Antonetta Mocha, a 61-year-old housewife, had little hope that the Italian authorities would ever tackle the illegal waste disposal that had long plagued her town and others just north of Naples. Her daughter was diagnosed with a rare cancer at age 5 in an area where clusters of cancers have been linked to pollution, but her years of marches, sit-ins, and comforting neighbors whose lives were upended by the untimely deaths of loved ones had yielded little. We need less talk, more action, she said. There has been talk for years. Recently, the European Court of Human Rights let it be known that it felt much the same. The court, based in Strasbourg, France, found that the Italian authorities had long been aware of the illegal dumping in an area colloquially known as the Land of Fires because of the persistent burning of toxic waste, but it said that local and national authorities had repeatedly failed to act. The court cited a 1997 report to Parliament that said the dumping had been going on since at least 1988. Protesters marched against the expansion of a nearby waste-to-energy plant in Asera, Italy in 2023. For years, activists have called for an end to the less costly illegal dumping and incineration. An ongoing study by the top heath authorities of Italy found in a 2023 report that the mortality rate for people in this part of Campania was 9% higher than the rest of the region. People had a greater chance of dying from malignant tumors, 10% higher, or circulatory system diseases 7% higher, and in some cases the statistics were stark. Instances of liver tumors in women were 31% higher. Alessandro Canavacciuolo, a local environmental activist, said he had been shocked into awareness about the pollution when lambs with 2 heads or 2 tails or 1 eye started to be born on the family farm. The health authorities eventually ordered the entire flock to be put down. His uncle Vincenzo died within a few weeks of a lung cancer that had metastasized earlier this month. He was invited to a meeting at the prefecture of Naples with assorted health authorities, lawmakers, law enforcers, and environmental activists to address the court ruling. Canavacciuolo, who is 36, could leave his home region, but has chosen to stay and fight. Our roots are here, he said. Why abandon a land that belongs to us? The people who have polluted it are the ones who should go away. Others cannot wait to leave. Maria Dialis, 18, known to everyone as Miriam, was just 5 when she was diagnosed with a kind of brain tumor that affects about 650 children per year in the European Union in Asera, a town of 60,000. There were 3 cases, said Ms. Mocha, her mother, now cancer-free, but still dealing with the aftereffects of her treatment. Ms. Dialis is in her last year of high school and hopes to become a tattoo artist after graduating. Not in Asera, this is where I had what I had, she said, and should I have children when I grow up, I do not want them to have my same experience. So I am leaving. 20 Japan citizen scientists collect radiation readings. Odaka and Tsushima, Fukushima, nuclear disaster zone. Citizen scientists reclaim the nuclear disaster zone in Japan armed with measuring devices. Groups of citizens are embracing science to monitor radioactive fallout and regain control of lives, upended by the 2011 meltdowns in Fukushima. Radiation from the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011 still threatens the small village of Tsushima. Armed with measuring devices, groups of citizens are embracing science to monitor radioactive fallout and regain control of lives, upended by the 2011 meltdowns in Fukushima. Radiation from the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011 still threatens the small village of Tsushima. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. February 5, 2025. Every year when they head out with measuring devices to keep tabs on an invisible threat that still pollutes the mountains and forests around their homes. Radioactivity in her car. Ms. Kobayashi makes regular stops to probe the air with a survey meter, a box with a silver wand that looks and acts like a Geiger counter. She uses it to detect gamma rays, a telltale sign of the radioactive particles that escaped when 3 reactors melted down at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in March 2011 after an undersea earthquake sent a towering tsunami crashing into the coastline. She and a group of fellow residents of Odaka, a small community 10 miles north of the plant, spend days collecting readings at hundreds of points, which they use to create color-coded maps of radioactivity levels emanating from reactor particles still scattered across the countryside. Ms. Kobayashi posts them on the wall of her small inn for guests to see, making up for a lack of government maps detailed enough to reveal potentially hazardous spots. At the height of the accident, a plume from the plant reached Tsushima during a snowstorm, lacing the falling flakes with dangerous isotopes. These soaked into the ground, heavily contaminating the village. Despite its location 18 miles from the reactors, a man uses a handheld device to map radiation readings in the village by identifying places to avoid. He hopes to convince former neighbors that it is safe to come back. A woman owner of the reopened inn in Odaka said it was her own maps that reassured her about moving back. She said citizen scientists must stay on the lookout for new leaks, with the cleanup expected to take several more decades. The radiation is not gone, she said, nor is the need to protect ourselves. A fence in Tsushima marks an area where radiation levels are too high to return. Most of the village remains off limits.